Welcome to the Subconscious Elements podcast. I'm here today again with my host, Tori Setliff, and we are going to talk about the gene keys. We're on the 5th gene key, and again, we're going through this. It's so funny that every gene key that we go through kind of resonates with one of our lives or maybe an experience in our relationship. So it's been a fun process for us to work ourselves through these gene keys to get to know them a little more intimately, and we hope you guys find the same thing. Tori, I'll kick it off to you for the intro.
All right, so at the 5th gene key, you can see the ending of time. And at the shadow frequency, we have impatience. And through impatience, we learn the gift of patience. And after transcending patience, you can get to a acidic state, which is the state of timelessness. This timelessness is the disappearing of time itself and being, where your body reaches the speed of light. So the programming partner for this gene key is going to be the 35th gene key, and these two shadow states coincide together, feeding off of each other in impatience and hunger. So these two are genetically tied. So it's saying that the 5th gene key forms the backbone of all of the 64 gene keys, and it can be seen as the library of consciousness itself. So that was pretty interesting. That kind of reminded me of something I've seen in a movie where you just see this library of everything that could ever be known. Basically, it was saying that at the shadow state, we become out of line with the universal rhythm of life, and this is what stems the impatience, and that we basically just get out of rhythm. And through this, we can see disease and all kinds of health problems. And it's fear of running out of time that actually leads to the impatience. And this is what we see in all of human consciousness. It's like the normal state for most people. Right.
So impatience is a symptom of fear. And I think a lot of negative emotions that we feel stem from fear. But man, I really had a breakthrough in this exact realm just the other day. I feel like something that I've been dealing with in my life is, if I examine my day-to-day life, it's a pretty awesome life, pretty unbeatable. I train, I get paid to teach others jiu-jitsu, so I get to do what I love, which is jiu-jitsu, creating content daily. I get paid to create content for others. And so I spend my time making funny memes, creating jiu-jitsu highlights, making podcasts, and training. And I've worked very hard for that. However, there is this, in my mind, a lingering doom of like, this won't last forever, because even though I am finally making money now, I'm not really making enough for it to last forever, right? We want to have a family one day, and there's things that we want to do. So there's like this idea that I have to achieve some level of success so that I can continue to live this lifestyle. So there's always like this hamster wheel effect going of, I've got to keep moving, I got to keep moving. So it's like, in one sense, I've escaped this idea of slavery of working for someone else. And me and you both know that's something that I've struggled with for a long time, right? Where it's like, no matter what job I get, how easy it is, or how much they pay, it's just like, at the end of the day, I'm working for someone else and it's driving me crazy. I break free of that, and now I'm in a new fear of like, what if this journey fails and I'm back to going to working for someone else? So it's like, even though I am working for myself, there's this constant fear that it won't last, or I'll come to a point where I'm gonna have to make a decision where it's like, oh, well, if you want a kid, you better choose this life that's gonna offer a more stable paycheck and money or whatever, falling into this schedule. And because of this fear, I find it hard to enjoy my life. Like when people ask me like how I'm doing, and it's kind of like trying to make it, that kind of just like, man, nothing. I don't want to complain about my life, but at the same time, I'm not fully satisfied because I'm chasing this thing that in reality is imaginary. And anyway, so the reason I kind of came to this realization was I went to a men's group meeting, and the last time that I was there was 2 years ago. And it was at the same house, the same guy hosted it. And it was just this moment where I was, since I kind of knew how it was going to go down, that we're going to do a circle and we're all going to speak about our lives or say what you want to say, I kind of went through this reflection of what I had said last time and where I was at. And then so I had this whole thing where I've been reflecting over the past 2 years, and then in order to give my speech, and I was like, man, I've come so far in 2 years. It's literally mind-blowing. Like, we had to drive 35 minutes to this dude's house because we were sleeping out of the gym that we were training at. And then, I wasn't making any money. My YouTube had just started. I think I only had like 1,000 or maybe 10,000 followers. No money yet. It was still like a new thing for me. And now telling my new story of how I'm getting paid, I got multiple income sources, I'm a head coach, about to get a black belt, like all these things. And then yet I'm still worried about not making it, And so I realize that this impending doom that has been like haunting me is all made up. It's not real. It's something, and it says it specifically in the book that these fears come from environmental conditioning that we've gone through. And it's like, that's so funny because that's exactly what it is, where it's just like, you go through life and, my parents never had a lot of money. They still don't have a lot of money. No one in my genealogy really ever has a lot of money. So it's just like, you're always going through this thing of just like, are you worthy? Are you going to make it? Are you going to be living paycheck to paycheck for your whole life? And those are all like cues that have been embedded in me subconsciously just from, again, my environment. And so, it's just been really trippy to experience. It's like, man, I've created my own cage, and all I have to do is just let go of it. And so if you're listening to this, one, I highly recommend finding a men's group. I think, and you might wonder, like, why a men's group? Well, I think that there's a huge benefit in not having the stress of a female presence around while you're trying to open up, right? It does feel like men can be a little more genuine when there's not the power of attraction with a woman that's present. Like, no matter what happens, that presence is there and can affect you. So when you're in a men's group, it loosens that a little bit, and you realize you're a little more available to open up. And when men are opening up to each other, again, you can kind of have like some breakthrough moments. And I've definitely experienced those within the men's group that I've been a part of. So I highly recommend it for anybody. But it's so funny. Like, that men's group was what? Today's Friday. I went to the men's group Wednesday. And we didn't start studying for this one until yesterday. So it was like, as soon as I started listening to it, I was like, dang. And it just seems like that recurring theme. I think it happened to us on the 4th gene key. We're kind of like snipping at each other a little bit. And then we're going through the 4th gene key. And
intolerance.
It was like, Yep. Anything you got on that, Tori?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that, whether they're starting a business or trying to break free from the comfort of what we've been told to do in our realities, like go to school, get a degree, work a 9 to 5. And that's like something that so many people have done, so you can see that path works in a sense that you can have a stable family and income. So branching free of that is kind of like the unknown path, and
kind of taboo.
Yeah, so it's all unknown and uncertain, and there's really like, you're building the ground that you're walking on as you go. There's not really a foundation, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I'm sure a lot of people can resonate, and if they haven't, then maybe that'll give them some level of assurance that this is doable and that you can do and that you are seeing progress. But in the same sense that you were saying, the reason why we are even reading this book is that we are trying to examine our lives and our consciousness in more detail. And the very fact of that is so that we can see these glitches or anomalies that we face that are like seated in fear. And once we see these things, we can then move into the fear so deeply that we can transmute it. And through this transmutation, we can, in a sense, like delete all the glitches. And through that, we go through like a system reboot, and we can feel it in our whole character as we're like letting go. I remember we had an argument where you're like, why do you keep doing this? And I was like, well, it's just how I always feel, and it's what I always do. And then it's like, well, stop doing it. And then it's like, in my mind was like, well, if I stop doing it, I'm not going to be the same person. And then what if I'm not the same person? Then people don't like me. And it's like, you're like, no, people are going to like you more because you're going to be better. You're going to be nicer. Like, and then even my like personality was like, no, it's not true. It's like, just let it go, you know, like trust that the reflections that I'm seeing are true.
Yeah. When you talk about glitches, it reminds me of Wreck-It Ralph. So we don't want to delete them, right? Well, another thing that it was saying, so is like everything is always as it should be. Mm-hmm. And kind of what you're saying, one of the key things that I had picked up that resonates with what you're saying was accepting the fear diminishes it. And so I'm kind of experiencing that where it's like just accepting that this impending doom is a fear of mine. It kind of goes away a little bit. Obviously, it doesn't completely disappear. But as you're saying, the more you delve into the fear, the more you just accept it and feel it and see it for what it is, you know, shine the light of consciousness on it, does it diminish? And we've been recently watching the movie Dune, where I'm old, so I can only watch movies in like 20-minute increments. But we've been working our way through the movie Dune, and that's our literal, fourth time watching this movie. We watched it when it first came out, and then we rewatched it with some friends. And so now we're going through it several times, and one of the big themes of the movie is fear. The mom of like the prophet, she keeps repeating the saying, and one of the things is, fear is the mind killer. And it really is, right? It's like, here I am going through life with this amazing life, and I'm not even able to appreciate it because of this fear. And yeah, when she's scared in the movie, like there's a moment where her son is being tested and it could lead to his death if he doesn't react correctly. And she has to like say the prayer. She's like, fear is the mind killer, the little death before death.
And that like telepathically rings into his mind at the same time and brings him like solace, like
dang, really?
peace.
I didn't even notice that. Yeah. That's freaking cool. Yeah, and then because they had multiple moments too where they're experiencing fear together. So there was like the one where he's being tested by the Bene Gesserit. Ooh, I remembered. And then another moment where they're flying through the sandstorm, and they literally have to quit fighting the storm and just let it take them. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what this whole thing is saying, is like life's a storm, and the more you fight it, the more turbulence, the more mistiming, the more, you know, the crazier things will get. But if you just let go with the river and flow with it, the easier it is to move through life.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me also of like the theme of Thanos, how he was like trying to genetically modify all of these new creatures for the new vision of life. Or was it Thanos? It was in what is that movie with all the Groot?
Talking about X-Men or Avengers?
No. Is it Avengers? Is it with the I'm Groot guy and the little raccoon?
Oh, you're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, that one. The new one.
Oh, with, well, not the new one.
Yeah, the new one where they had the new Earths.
Oh, right.
Genetic modifications, where he was trying to like recreate beings in a sense that he thought would be the best.
He was trying to remove all the negative aspects of society from these creatures. But I guess like the main point is that like life is messy, and that you can't like completely remove these imperfections out of life, right? And that was one of them. And I think that's like why he didn't like the raccoon.
Yeah, because he was different.
Right. Well, he wasn't in the creator's mind perfect. If anything, he was like he had what the creator wanted, which was like this next level intelligence, but he wasn't like a perfect designed creature. So he wanted to get rid of them and then try to get his intelligence in these new creatures.
And use his intelligence to recreate perfect versions of that with the intelligence.
Right. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was feeling whenever I was talking about like seeing fears and like mutations in these genes and stuff. But obviously that's like a shadow state is what he was doing. He was kind of like trying to force these mutations and like put his ideas on how he thinks that evolution should go instead of like allowing for natural evolution.
It was saying that a lot of times impatience can be seen as an advantage because it can force you into action to
Instead
do
of
something
being
about
complacent.
it. Right. But it was saying that any action out of irritation is out of alignment with the whole. So pretty much like this idea that, and we see it today in our culture, the hustle culture, hustle porn. You got to wake up at 4 in the morning. You got to wake up at 2 in the morning. You got to wake up before everybody else wakes up, and you got to work out. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do this. And like, there's guys that are super popular on Instagram, got 1 million followers, talking about Lamborghinis and stuff. And there's this one guy, he's like, yeah, you're just weak. You're not getting up and you're not accomplishing because you're weak, blah, 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 blah. And it cracks me up because it's just funny that we've now are tying the definition of weak to this idea of constantly hustling. So it's like, because you don't wake up at 6 a.m. and do all these things, or 5 a.m., whatever, the time just gets crazier and crazier. Mark Wahlberg posted a schedule and says he wakes up at 2 a.m. And it's like... That's
impossible for most people with normal schedules.
Yeah,
so
it's like...
It's only relative to your capacity and what you're capable of.
And a lot of times these guys don't start waking up that early until they're already successful and they have people making their food for them, planning their schedules for them.
They have more freedom with their time. And
Right. But so again, this idea is always being pushed onto the collective about like, you gotta hustle. You're not successful because you're not working hard enough, and you just gotta work, grind. And so when you feel like you're just not getting it, or you feel like you're out of alignment and things aren't going for you, so you're feeling this impatience, this fear, it's like, oh, you got to use that, and you got to use that energy to do more stuff. But actually that holds you back, and that it makes it harder for you to accomplish the things that you want. And I feel like that's a really hard distinction to make, it's like...
There's a line.
Right. I mean, you obviously you don't just want to like lie, or you don't... It's hard to be like that full-on hippie where it's like, oh, it'll just come to me when it comes, right? Like... but then at the same time, you don't want to be the guys like, gotta go, because both are truly draining on your energy. So, finding that balance of letting things come to you, working hard, right? Because every person feels good when they do something, right? When you accomplish something, when you put that little check mark on your to-do list. But then balancing that of like letting your body go through that period of like rest and... I remember that gestation period that we went over, I think in the first gene key, right? Like you can't force yourself through that, because then it prolongs it, and just accepting it actually helps you move you through the process faster. So again, very interesting.
Yeah, I was saying the reactive nature of the shadow frequency impatience is pushiness. And pushiness is kind of like the forceful energy, and it's more like the extroverted side of this energy. And it's when you're kind of like so stubborn that you're just pushing forward in your beliefs and your mindset, and this is the way it needs to be, and this is the way I always do it. And then it eventually leads to like a explosion, or the pressure has to be released in some way, so something has to break or snap. And through this, the cycle either repeats, or you can become more aware of it through seeing this reoccurring theme in your life. But then it was saying the repressive nature is also pessimism. And that's basically when you just give up on life, and it leads to like a collapse, where instead of like feeling that empowerment and that you can do something about it, you just rather accept that this happens to you and get in kind of like a negative mind state.
Yeah, one of the funny things about the men's group too, like it says, one of the things it says in the book is all life moves through difficult periods. And that if you are going through something difficult, be assured that every other being is experiencing the same thing, that we all go through this. And when I was at the men's group, everyone was saying that like this past couple weeks, everyone had something that they were kind of working through. And I didn't get a chance to share mine, but I had literally been going through, like, it seemed like all of us had like a couple things that we had just finished dealing with. One guy said one of his kids had gotten sick, and then someone else got sick, and then someone else said, yeah, they've been dealing with a couple cancellations on their stuff, and they've been trying to like figure it out. And then for me, I literally bit a hole in my tongue, and it really made me, go through this whole like thing about my speech and dealing with the lisp. And I'm like, man, I'm a content creator. God forbid I develop a permanent lisp. I still don't have any. I still am missing feeling in my tongue. I still notice I can hear it, even though other people don't notice it. I can hear the slight variation in my speech from the tip of my tongue being numb. And then I also got staph. And so that took me out of training for a couple of weeks, and that's hard to deal with. I went from everyone telling me I've been losing weight and I'm looking thin, looking great, and then I get staph and my tongue, I'm just literally like stress eating because I'm annoyed that I can't train. And but now that I'm on the other end of it, hearing other people going through it, literally almost everyone is just like, oh, dude, this happened to me and this happened to me, but everything's okay, So again, I just kind of resonated with that idea that don't get into that mindset like, oh, woe is me. It's literally all of us. All of us are doing this, but we're moving forward.
Yeah, it was saying that, like you said, all life moves through these seasons and rhythms, and this can be seen in as the changing of the seasons is a really obvious one. And it was saying that if you can tap into this change, that you can feel more deeply on how it truly affects you. And saying like winter time is when resources could be scarce, or you could be going through a loss or grieving process. But then spring always follows. So that's like the rebirth process. Everything starts fresh. You have a fresh perspective. You see the things that happened and you want to make change. And so it was just saying that these seasons in and of themselves affect us in ways that we are not even that much aware of. Most of us are. And it was saying that everything, whether it's on the microscopic level of cell growth and decay or animal migration, human migration, it all moves together. And everything moves the way it should be. It's like going against that natural flow is where you can see a lot of problems that we experience in humanity.
Yeah, I would say that that reminded me of the Hermetic principles. So it's like, again, you may be wondering, like, how can I use this information to make my life better or more enjoyable? And one of the Hermetic principles is the law of rhythm, right? So that everything moves in rhythm, ups and downs, troughs and peaks. And so the application of that is, if you're in a low, you know that it must be followed by a high. And so, and people use that in stocks and trading and crypto. Everyone, like, they're essentially like trying to find patterns. It's like, oh, it was down last time, it was this down, it went up to this much. Like, that's what they do. And so you can apply the same thing. And there's always like this meme that I'll see on Instagram is like, when you understand alchemy, so you purposely hit an all-time low. And it's just like,
because you know you'll be the rising phoenix on the other side.
right. And it really is scary, because I think about this a lot, where I'm like, man, I want to be more conscious. I want to have more awareness. But I know that it comes with some sort of price, right? Like, the only way consciousness grows is through trials and tribulations. So it's like you're to want more awareness, to want more consciousness, to want to be higher frequency or whatever, you're essentially asking for stress and challenges. And that can be a scary thing. But again, we kind of have to go back to what this is saying is, trusting the process. And again, like having to, that want of gaining more consciousness, but knowing that it's going to come with like difficult challenges.
Yeah, I remember on my last DMT trip, I went into like a downward spiral into like the deepest depths that I could ever imagine. It was so dark in my own mind, and I just saw, like, I heard like moving voices around my head and mind. It was just saying like, the shadows are where the heroes are born. And it was saying like unlocking fears, and like it was like, do you want to go deeper? And my consciousness was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm ready. It was like kind of like pulling away, and it was like, you must go deeper if you want to become what you want. And it's just like telling me like all these voices, and it's like super scary. It's like, I do want that, but it's like, do I want that? It's like, what that entails is like beyond what you can even imagine. It's like super scary to just dive in like head first. You're like, I don't know, well, what is it? And only that can be answered through trusting and allowing. It's like, no matter what happens, you're going to be okay regardless, and you just have to trust that process.
Right. Yeah, I think Chris Williamson was just on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was saying that anyone who's ever done anything great, like went through like some crazy events in their life, and that everyone wants the results, but no one wants to have gone through what they went through. And one of the examples he used was Elon Musk. Like, everyone wants to be the richest man in the world, but Elon Musk like describes his brain as just pure chaos, like a chaos storm of thoughts, and who knows how his brain works, but it obviously ain't normal, You hear him explain all these different things. The dude knows so much about batteries, flight, cars, traveling underground, space. It's like so insane that he has like so much knowledge on so many different things and so many different ideas. He's like balancing like 5 or 6 companies. And then he's also got more companies that he wants to create in the future. And it's like, wait, what?
And he's still actually a human with the human condition.
Right. Yep. And everyone watches every little thing that he does, which is trippy. So it's like, yeah, everyone wants the end results, but
there's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it was talking about the gift of patience and how it's basically the library of light. So moving through these shadows, basically you can get to a point where you've reached so many lows that you have no choice but to come to a breaking point. And through this breaking point, you can experience that there can be something on the other side. And it was just saying that patience can be learned, which I thought was good to think of if you're ever questioning. It's like, yes, patience can be learned, and just seeing how impatient you are in everyday moments, like being at the grocery store and someone's taking forever right in front of you. It's like, just breathe, relax, like step outside of that moment for a moment and just be thankful for even being at the grocery store, being thankful for what you're about to buy, the fruits and vegetables that are available, everything right in front of you, and just remembering that nothing has to happen immediately, that everything's fine. And so just remembering that is definitely something that can help you.
Yeah, it was saying your perception and your attitude changes how you perceive time, right? So impatience is a perception of time, right? We're like impatient with like how long something's taking. So it's like directly tied to time. And that is time is tied to your attitude and your perception of it. And that if you can change your attitude and your perception, you can change how patient or impatient you are. For me, that made a lot of sense, because it's like, again, the whole idea is like have an attitude of gratitude, right? Like changing the way that you see something can change time itself, which is pretty trippy, right? So like rethinking how you perceived your past will change your present moment, will change your future, right? Even having the right attitude about what you're doing will change how you perceive how long it takes and all of that, right? So like, if you completely dread what you're having to do, time lasts forever. Mm-hmm. But if you're in it and you're just doing it, it actually goes by pretty fast, right? Like, if you're doing the dishes and the whole time you're like, I fucking hate dishes, goddamn dude. It like takes forever. But if you just like, man, I'm gonna listen to my podcast. It's like before you know it, then you're like, man, I should do something else so I can keep listening to my podcast, you know? So again, main point I'm trying to get across is if you're impatient and you're trying to develop more patience, you can change if you work on your perception and your attitude in the moment, you can actually flip impatience to patience. And one last thing, not last thing, but one thing I want to get in real quick is how it had mentioned that in order to learn patience, you must have patience. So it's like a paradox almost. Mm-hmm. And that's like super trippy if you really think about it, because that's like true with like so many things, right? Like another one is like, you know what makes money? Having money. That was like in one of the movies we were just watching. He's like, no, you know what really creates wealth? Having wealth. And you don't have any, or something like that. I think it was Horrible Bosses. Mm-hmm. But that's like so true in so many different things. But yeah, it's kind of like first you get a little bit of patience, and then you got to use that to develop more of it. Because only through having it can you realize what more of it can do for you.
For sure. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. It was saying that it's the ring of light, and that the amino acid threonine directly allows the cells to trap light, which converts into energy. And the more light that you have basically allows you to be have more magnetism in your aura. And through having more magnetism in your aura, you can attract more light. And the more light that touches your DNA through the cell structure of the body can lead to more open-heartedness. And yeah, it was just basically saying, like, if you've ever felt the experience of being in love, you're experiencing a higher frequency. And this open-heartedness is exactly what can lead to more patience. And through this, you can experience like a timeless bubble. Like if you've ever been in love and you're like excited to see that person or excited to hear from them the next time, and just like time disappears, or you're going through your day and that's all you're thinking about, and you're just like floating around in this like lovely little space in your own world. And it was saying that through allowing more light into the body by proving more patience, then you can experience these higher levels more often.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely realize a lot about your aura and how it's affected by your mind state. And like, especially when you're in groups of people, you can see how like certain people's auras attract other people's auras and repel others. And, you know, believe it or not, you can tell a lot about someone by their body language and the vibe, and that all comes from like what they're thinking inside their head. So again, just like your thoughts and your way of being really does affect your like outside environment, reality.
And how other people perceive you as well.
Right.
Like I can experience sometimes where I'm just in my own mind, like I can feel that I don't want attention from other people, and I kind of close myself off. And I can sense that other people can sense that. Or it's like, yeah, I just don't really want to talk to people today, or I don't really want people talking to me. And you kind of get that energy put right back. But if I come into a situation and I'm super excited about what's going to happen and can't wait for the opportunities, and everyone wants to talk to you, you can sense it. They're like, man, what are you doing today? Just start a conversation, and it just keeps going and going. And then from that, more conversations and more connections. But it definitely plays a big role in how you show up and how you, like you said, think in your own space.
Right. So another thing that I really resonated with in this gene key was, it was saying that the city state of timelessness, so that's like the highest level where you transcend time altogether. It was saying that to even have patience is just one spectrum, right? And that true timelessness is the transcendence of impatience and patience. So that we really can't even like talk about it because it's outside of words. But this idea that patience and impatience are on the same thing. And I've heard someone talk about something very similar. It was Sadhguru. And it was probably like the most hard-hitting moment. So I read both of his books, Inner Engineering and Karma. For the life of me, I can't remember which book it's in. But one of these books has like this super awesome moment where he essentially says that the universe can't even, like God, universe, source, cannot be contemplated by our brains. And so that when you have a hope and a dream, you're essentially not trusting the universe's plan for you, right? And so he was saying that don't chase your dreams because the universe can create a life for you that you would never think possible. And so he was saying to trust the universe, like trust in life's grand plan, which is what this whole gene key was saying. But then he goes on to say that even trusting the universe in of itself is not full trust because that implies distrust. That trust is on the same polarity and that you have to transcend that, where you're just like so fully in depth in life that trusting isn't even a correct way to describe it. And that's like really hard to like imagine. Because I tell myself like all the time when I'm like feeling anxious, like yesterday, man, one of my clients was like, hey, I'm gonna put this on hold. And that's like my biggest moneymaker. That's like, and I literally just got a pay raise. So I was like super excited for this next month to hit so I can get a whole new paycheck. And I'm like excited. I'm like, man, a whole new year of this kind of money would be fucking awesome. Calls me yesterday. He's like, hey, something just came out. I got to figure it out. Put everything on pause. And I was just like all this, all my plans, no. And yeah, it's just like, so then I tell myself, trust the universe. Just trust the universe. And so, again, even the trusting part is coming from the distrust. It's like I have to tell myself this. But sure enough, today, he calls me and he's like, oh, we're all back on, buddy. And yesterday, I was really like so stressed out. Like, I wasn't like maximum stressed out. If you saw me that day, you wouldn't even notice. I don't think it really affected my like speech or like the way I interact with people, but on my way to teach, I couldn't satisfy my mind. Like music wasn't enough, a podcast wasn't enough, smoking weed wasn't enough, drinking my energy drink wasn't enough. It's like so much stimulus and like my brain was just still like searching for something to like ease this uncertainty in my mind, right? And so again, it's like even though I know it's like it's all gonna work out, dude. Relax, you're gonna find money some other way. Like I had to tell myself that multiple times, and then even that wasn't enough to like calm me. But I just remember experiencing this moment yesterday, like driving, like I switched my music to a podcast and then back to music, and then I was like, oh, I need to smoke. I was like, I don't need to smoke. I was like, oh, sip my energy. Just anxiety, you know. So again, just super trippy talking about like patience, impatience, transcending it all together. And again, I really remember that quote from Sadhguru is like, the universe's plans for you are so much greater than you can dream of that you should just fully be into it, and that even trusting is only a small aspect of what the point that he's trying to get at. And even though I've even experienced that in my life, it's still tough to accept, right? Like, again, I can't even imagine me telling myself a couple years ago that I'm gonna have a super successful YouTube channel and I'm gonna be doing all kinds of podcasts or whatever. It's just like, or even like 5-10 years ago when I was a Marine, you know, it's like if someone told me what I'd be doing now, I'd be like, wait, what? And it'd melt my brain. So again, just that process of, I guess that's right. It's like a process of distrust, trust, impatience, patience, and only through going through it all can you really like reach that next level state.
Yeah, I was saying that the codes of timelessness lie within the codes. So it's like at the highest frequency that we can perceive, there's codes within those high frequencies that we can't even perceive. And so just thinking about that is really trippy to think about. But yeah, I was basically saying, well, through this information, is there a reason to even continue studying? And it's like, well, there is and there isn't. Like, it matters and it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's all what you want and what you're trying to understand. And it's saying that at the end of time, time will reveal everything. So it will all become clear. But this is through the process of trying to clarify and kind of push away the clouds so we can try to understand deeper.
Yep.
Yeah, even as I was writing the notes, I was just like, man, my microscopic perspective is so tiny in like the understanding of the entire universe, and just like seeing myself write down these notes. And even as I'm writing down the notes, I'm forgetting what I'm writing down. And I'm like, how am I writing these notes, listening to this information, and still not retaining all of it? Like, it's such a hard concept to even understand that. I'm literally trying my best, and I'm still not retaining even as much as I possibly could if I could perceive more, you know. So it's like a process of opening myself up to this information and allowing myself to retain as much as I possibly can, and just the continual process of trying to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I think one last thing that I got on this part was, how much time we spend waiting. Right? It was saying that that life itself is waiting for death. Right? Like, essentially, we're all born to just be like waiting around till we die. Right? And it's like, that's scary, but also powerful, if you really think about it. Because it's like, if we're all, because I feel like sometimes we are just like waiting to die. Right? Like, I feel like everyone kind of feels like, maybe experience this feeling sometimes where you're just like, I'm gonna wake up, do this shit again. You know, it's like, sometimes I'm like, man, do I even want to come back? It's like, some people will tell you that, oh, we're all going to be reincarnated and do this again. And they're like excited for it. And sometimes I do feel like that, like, man, I can't wait to do this again. And then some days I'm like, man, I just want to sleep. like, can I just like hit the off button for a week or something? Because it seems, you know, in the same sense that like we feel this gratefulness to be alive, right? We should all be grateful that we're alive. At the same time, kind of like, why the F am I alive? You know, like, because we got to work and we got to do stuff. Like, at no point can you really just like sleep for as long as you want, right? Like, we get this like feeling in our brain that's like, I wish I could just sleep for a couple more hours, but then your body won't even let you sleep. It's like, no, you're awake now. It's like, but if I could just sleep for another day, I'd feel so much better. Or like taking a break from work, or taking a break from the chase. It's like, but you feel like you can't, because if you do, then you're gonna lose your place or whatever.
Momentum.
Right, your momentum. And so, yes, sometimes it comes to this feeling like we're just like waiting to die, you know? Yeah, I mean, I don't really know where to go with that, but just like the amount of time that we spend waiting, right? They've actually like done statistics, and it's like you essentially you're waiting half of your life. Like, half of your life you're spending like sitting in a line.
Stoplights.
Sitting at stoplights, or just driving somewhere, or, you know, what we're all like, we spend a huge significant portion of our lives just like waiting for something, a meeting, a phone call, a text message, whatever. It's like, most of our lives spent waiting. So it's just kind of like that trippy paradox of like, in life where we spend a lot of time waiting, but life itself is waiting. Right?
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and he was just talking about how we have like archaic structures of time, and that centuries old, that we used to have this thought process of like 24-hour days. But now we can do things so much quicker, so it doesn't really make sense to kind of structure our time and mentally or physically in that way anymore. Saying that everyone does a meeting for 1 hour, but in the meeting they're kind of trying to stretch it so long so it can actually last the full hour, whereas they can just have a 30-minute meeting, 20-minute meeting, however long the actual information needs to be spoken, like relative to that exact meeting. You can get it done way quicker, more energized, more energy, like everyone's more focused, more dialed in. They know, like, all right, we're going to be here, this is going to be worth my time, 20 minutes, I'm in and out, and then they're focused. But you have these 1 hour meetings and they just drone on and people show up late, and so it's just like this archaic thought process. They were saying like the 24-hour days, it's like, well, yeah, you had to travel on a horse, and like you had to go hand write a letter, and you had to go give this letter to someone that would ride a horse to give the letter to someone. And so it's like a whole thing. And so now we could just send a text message, send an email. So it's like, why are we kind of still in this way of thinking? So he says that for him, he does like 3 8-hour days. So his one day.
I was literally about to bring that up. Are you talking about? I want to say it was Andy Frisella or something like that. It was one of those high level entrepreneurs. Yeah, he was saying 3 separate days, so that it's like from 6 to 12. He gets these things done from 12 to 6, and he does these things, and then from 6 to 12 again. He has it's like little mini days within a day.
Yeah, that way you can kind of like make the best use of your time by thinking of time differently. Just like changing your own perception of time to fit your schedule, your day. It doesn't have to be the exact way. He says he structures it differently depending on the day. And so that helps him keep himself accountable every hour.
It'd be funny if he was like constantly like, someone's like, yeah, you want to have a meeting at 2 p.m. tomorrow? Today? Tomorrow? Yeah. When you were saying that's exactly the same person I was thinking of. And then the thing on the waiting in time thing too is like, how many times do we meet somebody, or do you hear someone, or maybe we've said it, where it's like, can't wait to be an adult, can't wait to get a black belt, can't wait to get a promotion, can't wait to get this, can't wait to have enough money for this, can't wait to buy one of these. And it's like, that's what life is. It's like waiting for this next step. And then when you get to that next step, you already had it in your mind of the next thing.
The next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the classic is like, can't wait to be an adult. And then you get like the Happy Madison moment where he's squeezing the little kid's face, and he's like, cherish it. Because the little kid, he's like, I can't wait till I get to high school. And Billy is like, stay here, stay in school, cherish it. He's like shaking the kid's face. It's like so true. It's like with anything, it's like jiu-jitsu. Everyone wants to be a black belt, but when you're a black belt, you're gonna miss just being a fucking blue belt, just learning random shit, purple belt, brown belt. And it's like everyone thinks the end game is the goal.
Answer. Yeah.
But the journey, right? Classic.
Yeah, that's what I was saying in the Gene Keys also. It was just saying language itself, like we're saying that the shadow is the low frequency and the acidic is the high frequency, and just that the goal is to reach a higher frequency, but this in and of itself is like playing into the duality. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I really feel like that same kind of thing with the whole ecological versus drilling idea, where it's like there's this argument of which one's better or what, but the argument itself is kind of silly, because if you really think about it, I think both are just like different ways of learning. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. I think depending on the situation is the one that you use. Because just because something is not the most efficient doesn't mean you use it every time. And I just think about it as like, if the only way to learn jiu-jitsu is to play, or to play these games, that's like intense. It's always intense. Like maybe some days I just want to move around. I just kind of want to show you something, but I don't really want to fucking play a game with you, because it's whether or not you can play, it's still like a higher level of energy output. So it's like, again, this whole argument of which one's better. Now, I do think that like having like a traditional basic setup of how class is taught, that it can be like an inferior way. Like, right, if you have a business model and you're trying to accomplish something, there definitely is a better way of going about it. But as far as like which one's the best, I think it's obvious the answer is like an amalgamation of the two, which is what this whole thing is saying, is that it's like
The mutation. Yeah,
both
it's
are
like
one ends of a
archaic.
polarity, and we're just trying to balance the two.
It's like the old ways of thinking into the new ways of thinking. And it's saying that through these mutations, there's hidden genetics beneath the old genetics that we're trying to unlock and reveal.
Right. Yeah, I wrote down here, it says when the self realizes itself is a set of patterns. So like the self, whatever you think is you, is just a set of patterns. And that in of itself can be a acidic state. Like the only way to reach the acidic state is to realize that you're an amalgamation of patterns. Like to me that was given, I'm pretty sure I'm not saying it right, but to me it was giving me those Matrix vibes. If you've seen all the Matrix movies, it's like, even when he escapes the Matrix, he's still in a Matrix kind of thing, right? And if you met anyone who's successful or has a high level of anything, it's like, no matter what step or goal or breakthrough that you have, it's like a circle. Like it's the same process, just on a different level, right? So it's like, classic example that I can relate to is like, people think you make it when you get black belt, but everyone will tell you when they're a black belt, it's like they started over, right? It's like once you get black belt, that's when the journey begins. And it's like, that's such a trippy thing. I remember I was talking to my buddy and I was telling him how I'm like, I feel like I'm just now like learning some real shit about jiu-jitsu, even though I've been doing it for 12 years. He's like, you feel like that? it's like
There's
in his
no
mind.
comfort.
Yeah, it's like in his mind, I know everything. I'm a fucking master. And it's like at a master level, I'm still like, dude,
Learning.
there's so much that I don't know. But the whole idea of that realization that what we call the self is an amalgamation of patterns. And through that allows you to see these patterns and try to transcend them, right? I mean, I guess like trying is a weird word to say. It pretty much tells you not to try, or it doesn't matter whether you try or not. But again, an awareness of it is the most important thing.
And just try to improve and make the small changes. And yeah, when you were talking about the Matrix idea, I was thinking about that episode of the Black Mirror, the one with the love and the timers. I was thinking about how, like, regardless of, so it was about a couple that basically they were matched together, so they met and went through their relationship, and once their timer ran out, oh man, I have to back it up, hold on. So basically it's about the timers, and a lot of the relationships, they choose to look at the time and how long they'll be together, and then just the very essence of seeing how long the time is will change the actual reality of how long they'll be together. And in this Gene Key was saying that's the same thing with disease. Like when a child is born, if they become aware that the child has a heart condition, that the fear reaction in the parents will seed a genetic coding within the child, which will then make it more likely that they'll have this heart condition, even though it was like only like a chance. It'll weigh the chances in the favor of the heart condition because the reaction was fear, and throughout their entire lives the fear will be kind of
Ingrained.
It's like they just keep saying that it's gonna
Propping it up.
Yeah, basically. I don't know the exact word, but it's basically they're just
Feeding into it.
yeah, feeding into it, and so this is more likely to happen. But back to the Black Mirror episode, so this relationship is going very well, and they both agreed not to look at the timer, and so the man is so infatuated with the girl that he can't help himself but look at the timer, regardless of their
Because he's
promise.
afraid that it's going to end.
Yeah, he's afraid of the time running out. And so he goes behind her back without her knowing, looks at the time, and every time he looks at it, the time gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And so he doesn't tell her this, but it's affecting the way that he's acting when he's with her. So he's no longer in the present moment with her. He's in fear, in the fear state of time running out. So she starts to feel this energy, and she asks him what's going on, and he just kind of puts it off until finally he tells her what happened, and she's super upset. The relationship ends. They both get matched up with other people multiple times, and neither one of them are happy. They're both just imagining what could have been. And then eventually they decide to disobey the system altogether and come back together. Or no, the system did put them back together. Actually, it put them back together, but I think that the relationship was ending again, and they decided to basically break through the matrix. And once they broke through the matrix, they understood that they were just in a higher level of playing, that they were still in the game, but they were just at a different level. But at least that they were together, and that they could start like on a different level.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the whole idea of transcending the patterns. I also wrote down here, it says, only when you quit trying to leave the frequency can you transcend it. So it's like, I guess it's saying like being accepting of these patterns. Like if we try to escape, that essentially we stay in the cycle of karma, right? And that's like the whole idea of karma is that as long as you play in cause and effect, you will continue to create karma for yourself. And it's just that idea of like just being in it and being accepting of what things are, right? So the dude, he was in fear and had to look at the time. That's also a principle of like that's like a typical thing that happens in seeing the future. So if you've ever watched a show where a future comes into play, a lot of times one of the arcs is that if you see the future, there's a good chance it changes. Just by seeing the future, you change the future, because the future only happened because you didn't have an awareness of it, right? So classic example, one of the ones I remember this specifically was That's So Raven. She had an ability to see like,
Psychic powers.
yeah, she could see the future, but it didn't always come to true because she saw it. And because she saw the future, she would like try to change things, and her changing things would like mess things up. And, or what she saw didn't play out like she thought it was, or whatever. It was like a classic thing. And then another one was in the Marvel universe with Thanos, when Doctor Strange uses the time stone to peer into the future. Iron Man like asked him, well, how do we do it? And he's like, if I tell you, it won't happen. Mm-hmm. And I try to incorporate that in my own life, because I definitely think that there is a thing to these gene keys. I think that there are people who could look at our hands and tell things about us. I think that there are people who reach these acidic states or are such masters of patterns that they can, tell you something that happens in your future or whatever. Because it's always interesting. I'm sure we've all thought about going and seeing a psychic. Like what would it be like? What would they tell me? Like these people must know something, right? I mean, it's not all complete. I mean, this book is essentially telling us that these things are possible, right? And then so one of the main reasons though that I don't go to these people is like, again, that idea of like, if you trust the universe, you don't need to know. Like, what are they going to tell you that's going to help you? And it's like, if they did tell you, it's like that information could affect you in a way that diminishes or maybe changes
Increases
the effect itself or what it is that you were wanting. So yeah, one of the main reasons I don't go to psychics or, seek out these monks that can tell you things is because, by knowing you could actually mess it up for yourself. And so, right, like the whole reason we are here is because we don't want to remember. Right? Like that's part of this game, is to forget. And if you knew, it wouldn't be fun. So, it's a very interesting thing to think about, right? Like time, fortune telling, the future, the past.
Yeah, I was saying that you can basically increase the chance of happening or decrease, so it can go in either favor. But that's also reminds me of like the saying, it's like, who are you when no one is watching? And it's like putting that awareness on to what's happening when you're not aware of it.
What else you got, friend?
Oh, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think the last two things that I had written down was, the balance of metaphor and literal interpretation. Like what you mentioned earlier, the book had said that it doesn't really matter to study this or to not study this. Like everything is as it's supposed to be. So again, that like balance of metaphor and literal interpretation. And then the last thing was you can't measure or define consciousness. So this whole idea of lower states, higher frequencies, lower vibrations is all just words, right? So essentially saying that like, don't get too hung up on what these things are. And we all know that we all do this. We're always like, high vibrations, good vibes only, right? Kind of thing where it's like, you don't want to be in a shadow state or whatever. But it's pretty much saying that, the city of timelessness, it's like you can't even speak about it. It's above words. All these city states are above words. The frequencies themselves are above words. So us trying to use words to explain it, we have to understand that it's not 100%, that we are literally just playing. And I definitely do appreciate the words, because I really do think that using words to describe these things and being educated in it really does help you understand. But I think the main point you're trying to get across is don't let that be like all that it is, right? Just understand that this is, like you said, we only have a very small perception or grasp of what the entire wisdom is, and maybe leading with that like idea of you're just trying to understand what you can understand, and it's above your comprehension, but you're just trying your best, is like the best way, instead of like, because you can see how quickly this could be dogma, right? Where it's just like live and die by the word, and the next thing you know, it's a freaking Bible or something, right? It's just pretty much trying to say that this isn't like a straight line, or that there's even a line to begin with. So yeah, again, that's just a trippy thing to think about, that you can't measure or define consciousness. So bearing that in mind as we talk about higher frequencies, lower frequencies, and vibrations and emotions.
It's all just something to help you understand what you're going through, and that it's mutual through all creatures. Yeah, it's pretty interesting whenever I think about people that study like other tribes on the world right now that don't speak, and they actually just use like whistles and tones and facial expressions and breathing patterns, and they don't really use words at all. So it's just like a different way of living, and saying that they're less intelligent than us is what we typically do, but it's to disrespect for all the information that they have accumulated in their specific environment.
Yeah, and it was just saying how important it is to play within these words. Like this book was essentially it's like a play of words. Like, again, trying to say that it's not like black and white. That this is just playing with the words and trying its best to put the wisdom out there. And I find it's always interesting to me when you really figure out like the differences in words. Like in the English language, we have so many words that at first glance all mean the same thing. And it's like, well, why would you use this word over this word, or this word over this word? And it's always interesting when someone actually knows why there's a different word for something.
Break it down.
Yeah, so like one that I can just remember off the top of my head was like the difference between a bog and a marsh. And it's like, in most cases, a bog and a marsh are the same thing. But someone was actually like explaining the exact difference of these words. And it's like, you have like bogs, marshes, swamps. There's literally like a bunch of different terms that you can use to describe like a swamp. But all these different words mean like a very specific thing that just gets lost to the average person. Like they don't know the difference between a bog and a marsh. But if you study like amphibians or something, or aquatic life, on the East Coast, you're very familiar of,
It's a difference.
yeah, what a wetland is. Like, I guess like bogs and marshes are two different types of wetlands based on the water mix. Like one's like brackish water feet, and one's a type of water that comes from something else. Like one is like where the water's coming from underground water, and then the one's coming from a river feed or the ocean. So it's all really interesting, and I feel like, again, that this book does the same thing, where it explains certain things in different ways, where you're just like, okay. You don't have the definition, but you have a better definition than what you had before. But yeah, if that's all you got, Toey. Well, we appreciate y'all tuning in. This has been the Subconscious Elements Podcast, and we appreciate you guys.